Is Smogon better than VGC? Has Stunfisk ever been good competitively? Is there a Pokemon you have a love-hate relationship with? And why are VGC EV spreads so complicated and Smogon spreads so simple? I'm going to answer some of Reddit's most interesting competitive Pokemon questions. Here we go. Let's start off with a controversial one. Which is better, Smogon or VGC? I'm in the rare position of knowing both, so I can offer a meaningful answer. VGC is the official format where you battle 4v4 double battles, and Smogon is an unofficial website where you can battle 6v6 single battles. Despite being unofficial, Smogon is popular because it was created before there was an official format, it's linked with Pokémon Showdown, the #1 battling simulator, and because to an extent it's more intuitive. 6 Pokemon battles is what you do in the actual game. One thing that they do that's controversial is that if a Pokemon is deemed overpowered, the community votes to ban it. Meanwhile, VGC doesn't ban anything. Instead, they have a rotating format approach where the format changes every few months. For example, the latest rule set starting in May is going to allow 1 restricted legendary per team. Which is the better approach? The question needs to understand the fundamental difference between the two. Double battles inherently have less broken Pokemon. A broken Pokemon only occupies 1/4 of the game state instead of half. It's much easier to tag team it and beat it with, for example, a double target. Pokemon can still be broken, but it's generally much harder. Take a look at Smogon's own double battle format. They ban Pokemon too, but they ban much less than Smogon's single battles. Also, the game is balanced for VGC. Pokemon will do their best to balance the game for their format. Obviously, they won't care to balance the game for an unofficial format. It's why I'm sympathetic to Smogon banning stuff. The game is already balanced for VGC, and Smogon has to take their own measures to balance things for their format. For example, banning Last Respects, a move that hits 300 base power if 5 Pokemon are fainted, or Little Cup banning Duraludon. It is not cowardice or a refusal to adapt, it's acknowledging that the game is not balanced for a format it doesn't care about. There is nothing wrong in admitting that. On the other hand, VGC doesn't need to ban anything. Coming to the tiering system, I think having tiers is objectively good. You don't lose anything, but you create a venue where if you want, you can use a favorite Pokemon in a venue where it's evenly matched. VGC having lower tiers would be cool, but it's not a big deal either way. So which is better? It's hard to compare because it's apples to oranges. In my personal opinion, I do like VGC's rotating system. The rules are stable, you know what's going to happen, and you can try and optimize as much as you can. And even if you don't like one particular metagame, it will rotate in a few months anyway, and that keeps it from getting stale. But again, it's what you care about. The most interesting aspect to me is making the best possible Pokemon teams. I don't mind broken Pokemon as much. On the other hand, I also don't really care about bad Pokemon having a place to be viable. The answer to the question depends on your priorities. Has Stunfisk ever been good competitively? No, but also kind of. Apparently it's good in Pokemon Go, but I can't comment on that. Fundamentally, what does Stunfisk have? It has decent special bulk, Stealth Rock, and Static to paralyze the opponent. Unfortunately, a defensive Pokemon that doesn't have recovery is pretty bad. It's really good in Gen 5 PU, the 5th tier, and the highest tier I can ever recall it being used was during Gen 6 UU, the 2nd tier. At the time, Mega Pidgeot was dominating the tier and Pidgeot would end up getting banned. But at the time, it was niche, but you could use Stunfisk to counter Pidgeot. It tanked every attack and punished Pidgeot's U-turn with Static. The main idea is roll compression. You could counter the most dominating Pokemon in the meta while also getting up Stealth Rock. Other than that though, it's been pretty terrible. Why are VGC EV spreads so intricate while Smogon EV spreads are pretty normal? The main idea is that these spreads target specific scenarios, and specific scenarios don't happen often in Smogon. Smogon games are longer, and over the course of the battle, little bits of damage happen a lot. There's no point creating a carefully crafted EV spread to live a particular attack or get a particular kill when over the natural happenings of the game you're going to be taking damage elsewhere. Even something like Stealth Rock changes the calculation completely and makes your EV spread moot. It's much more useful to think of the game in terms of heuristics. You want your Pokemon to either be offensive or defensive or mixed. That's why 252 EV spreads get the job done. But in VGC, oftentimes you are going to be at 100% HP. That reliability means you get incredible value because the calculations you make are much more likely to occur in an actual game. For example, Fluttermane often uses all sorts of exotic EV spreads, and they often EV to reliably live an attack from Chien-Pao. A Fluttermane at 100% versus a Chien-Pao is extremely common and worth game planning around. But that would be pointless on Smogon because even one early game attack or Stealth Rock, and the Fluttermane EV spread doesn't do anything anymore. In fact, it could even be detrimental because you EV'd for one exact scenario that didn't happen and now you're worse off into the other matchups. Also in VGC, switching is much more expensive. If you switch, you're not doing anything while your opponent attacks you twice. On Smogon, you'd switch your offensive Pokemon out of a threat, but in VGC, you'd want to try and stay in. It's common for even offensive Pokemon to invest in defenses in order to live a common attacking combo. And finally, it's because VGC is level 50. At level 50, you gain 1 stat point for your first 4 EVs and then 1 stat point for every 8 EVs after that. So instead of going 252, you gain 1 more stat point by going 244. That's only a minor optimization, but it makes the EV spread look more complicated than it actually is. What is cheating on Pokemon Showdown? This is actually a nuanced answer. In a vacuum, it's reasonable to say that you should not have any external assistance at all while playing the game. You shouldn't be able to look up a Pokemon, or search up a mechanic, or use a calculator. You can't use a dictionary in Scrabble. And in-person tournaments obviously don't let you use Google during a game. But playing online is distinct because you can't police what your opponent is doing. You can't know if your opponent is Googling the type chart or using a calculator. As a result, the culture for online Pokemon tournaments developed that you are allowed Google or databases or calculators. It is normal. The distinction is that you're allowed to use things that give you knowledge but not decision making. You can't have a friend tell you what moves to make, but you can Google a Pokemon to check its speed stat. I find the question interesting because there's nothing inherently moral about allowing a calculator, but it became culturally normalized because of circumstance. A Pokemon that I have a love-hate relationship with is Darkrai. I use Darkrai a lot in Gen 6 Ubers in the Ubers World Cup. In fact, you can watch those games on my second channel. I upload gameplay videos there and you can see my World Cup run. But I use Darkrai a lot because Dark Void is an incredible move. But its inaccuracy is painful. If you miss, you might get one-hit KO'd instead. But that's not the entirety of it. People also started teching Sleep Talk on Pokemon. Darkrai is easily one of the best Pokemon in the format, so I loved using it, but it became painful trying to figure out if my opponent is going to Sleep Talk me or not. Should I Sludge Bomb that Xerneas, or is it going to Sleep Talk Moonblast me and knock me out? It makes the game filled with uncomfortable decisions. And of course, there's still the regular nonsense with Sleep that made it annoying too. Still though, it's my favorite Pokemon in the tier. Do you like this type of question-answer Reddit recap format? If this gets a lot of positive feedback, maybe I'll do a more formal Q&A session on Twitter or even a Reddit AMA. Let me know by subscribing if you're new and liking and commenting for feedback.